Hi, Mike.
Hi, Chelsea.
Happy Father's Day.
Thank you.
I look forward to asking you a few questions today about fatherhood and what that has meant for you and inside of you, especially maybe ways that we don't articulate regularly or maybe I haven't understood. So I want to ask you some of those questions.
Okay.
And also just want to publicly say that I am really glad that you are the person, you are the dad in my life and in our kids' lives. And I love the duality of you and I and how our kids get different perspectives and experiences. I appreciate that you are nurturing and loving and you're a good listener to them, which is such a high valuable thing to me. It's been fun to parent with you.
Thank you.
Yeah. What is on your mind when you think about fatherhood, specifically in light of Father's Day, but just in general?
Yeah, so many things. I feel like it encompasses a lot and intersects and overlaps with a lot. And it has also been, I think, undergoing a lot of change over the past couple generations.
Conceptually, fatherhood over the last generation?
Yeah, I think a lot more men want to be more present in their kids' lives.
And that's more and more accepted, maybe, than
ever. Yeah, that too. Yeah. Well, I think appreciate all those things. It is a joy, and if you're a parent, you also know that it is sometimes very challenging, and it is still worth it. At least it's been so far.
I mean, that's how we measure life, right? Like, I just saw actually someone post this about marriage. It was a marriage therapist and I can't remember who it was. And so I apologize for that. But his take was like, yeah, marriage is going to be really hard. You keep choosing. Does the joy and growth and kind of fulfillment in you outweigh the grief that comes with like doing life with this person? But I guess in parenthood it's a little different maybe, but still I'm thinking about that scale of like, where is the grief real and where is the joy and growth in those?
Yeah, and I'd say that first, like, it has gotten better and easier in some ways.
Like what?
Newborns, that stage was really difficult for me. I wasn't sure, how to provide what was needed. I definitely felt outpaced by you. Being the mother and the breastfeeder and those things. But I think, there was also like the inability to fully understand, like this baby's crying, but I don't know what they're saying. And so in some ways it has gotten easier because of language development and being able to communicate ideas more thoroughly, especially for our son who likes to know why. Especially if he has to agree to something, which is a great life skill. You shouldn't go around blindly agreeing to things throughout life. And so, it's easy to be like, because I said so. But it seems more productive to say, hey, I'm glad you're asking. Number one, I'm your parent. And so sometimes you just have to do what I say. And we can talk about it later because right now we're in a hurry. We gotta go. But number two, it's good to ask because you want to know what you're getting into. But number three, again, I'm your parent and you should trust me if I'm making decisions for you. But those conversations in the beginning, our son in particular was not quick to agree to anything that he did not see. I mean, even before he knew how to speak, unless he could see what he gets at, like what kind of benefit he gets. And so as he has grown, there has been the opportunity to explain, like, well, like one of his things recently is like, I don't know, we have a screen-free Sunday rule. And he'll say, but you make up the rules. You can change the rules. And then that has gone to like a broader conversation of like, you make up all the rules. And then that has come to, well, we do. And you will make up the rules for your life, more and more as you get older and older. And the rules that we choose are the ones that we, to the best of our understanding, are going to bring out the best life we know how to get out.
Yeah.
And so it might not always be fun to stick to the rule. The rules that we do have, we've chosen because we think they have a good payoff.
Is that so? You were talking about the newborn stage being really hard.
Yeah.
And then now being in this stage where it's kind of a different kind of hard.
Yeah.
Which.
But there's more understanding.
Yeah.
Like, I think that, and their personalities have come out more, and they're silly, and like there's inside jokes, and I think there's a lot of investment in the beginning, and then you sort
with
of
nothing
with nothing back except more crying and more interrupted sleep. But now that payoff is starting to come about.
Payoff.
Yeah. And just spent some time in the garage teaching my daughter how to use a hammer and my son how to use a power drill, and then my daughter how to use a power drill. Like there's just that they're growing and seeing it. There's the joy of watching them grow and develop, and I don't know.
So
good.
I think I remember, and I could be misquoting you here, but that at some point, I think a few times you've told me that you didn't really feel connected or like your place until a couple of years in. Is that?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And that might be biologically based too, but I struggled to have a felt connection with my kids, definitely in the beginning. There were little snippets, I think, where my daughter she would be enamored with dad. I feel like that lasted a couple months. And then she became enamored with her big brother, who's so much cooler than dad.
So we're going to have to work through that.
Oh, man. Yeah, but it's, like I pictured it being a little different just from what you see, portrayed. But it's, he's actually a great brother. And I love that they're close because that relationship is going to outlast my relationship with her, too. Mm-hmm. So, but I think that all probably goes through its phases, and there will be a time that they are not going to be as close.
Yeah.
So,
what was it about the newborn stage, those early stages, that just didn't feel the same as it does now?
Shoot, that's a good question. Well, like with Sage, there was the brief period of time where she was like interested in being with me, and I think, that's just nice. When your kids want to be with you. It's just, Daddy, can I be with you while you build the shelf? So I'm not sure, other than you start to see some of the payoff.
Yeah, and that might be it. I was thinking a lot about the overstimulation.
Definitely. Yes.
Is what I was thinking would be the biggest thing.
Cool. Yeah.
Which I think a lot of people deal with and face, and maybe even feel guilty about that.
Yes.
Like you almost kind of have like a wall up or a fear around your kid.
Yeah.
When that overstimulation period is there.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm probably more sensory sensitive than the average person, dad. So it did feel very intense. And actually that has been a challenging thing to work through. Is there were so many times early on that just being in the same room made me feel tense, like waiting for the screaming to start. And I've had to kind of uncondition myself. Like I need to be safe in myself to be a safe place for them, kind of thing. But yeah, the overstimulation was very, very difficult, and ugly Mike comes out. Frustrated, irritable Mike comes out. He's not the best dad figure.
What's up? Hi, what's up? Okay, you can just put the timer off. That was for the dishes. That's all that was for.
Did you get the dishes done already?
Okay. That's what the timer was for. All right, let's talk about... I'm sorry. Did you have anything to finish there?
I don't think so. I mean, it has been more of a roller coaster of a journey than I feel like I would let on in this short conversation. I think you've hit on a good point. Like some people feel bad, right? Like, oh, I haven't stayed eternally patient with my child. And that's just real life, right? Like there have been another thing that I'm glad has developed in communication is the ability to apologize and say, hey, I was frustrated earlier about something entirely different. Yeah. And for some reason you said that thing and I just got upset at you, and I really wasn't. It wasn't you, And so then then you can work through that, and I'm gonna try to not do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's not easy, but it is good.
Can you tell me a little bit? I mean, I've obviously been with you through these seasons, but about like pre-dad Mike and dad life Mike, and any areas that you feel like you've specifically expanded or grown.
Yeah, that's good. Parenthood has definitely has felt not like a new chapter, but like a whole new book. I do feel like the kind of growing there is, I don't know, there's growing that feels good, and there's growing that is like just painful. Hey, kiddos.
Guys, can we have our space back, please?
Hey, can you guys go downstairs till we're done with the recording?
Why? I want a TV computer.
You can come look at that later, okay? We need about 5 more minutes.
Where's the TV?
Thank you to whoever's moving towards the door right now. I can't see who it is, but I hear 2 kids moving to the door. Thank you. Did you lose your train of thought?
Probably.
We were talking about pre-baby Mike, post-baby Mike.
Yeah.
Where have you expanded?
Yeah. So I think there have been some real definitive moments in parenthood. One is, I feel like there is no manhood ritual in our modern American culture, kind of like there has been maybe in the past or in other cultures, where, okay, you're a boy, you're going to go through this thing, and then officially you're a man. If you're not fully grown by the time you have a kid, that's the last stop. That's your last chance at a ritual to manhood. Because there's so much selflessness required, and there's so much giving up and growing up that has to be done. And it's really, it's quite a challenge sometimes. But there was a time that we were in the camper traveling, and I don't know, we were like, oh my God, my dog, get out of here, dog. I can't. Everybody just wants attention. Go meet all of our pets. Okay, lay down.
Good girl.
Yeah, and I don't remember, I think we were playing like a board game or something, but it was one of the first times that we all laughed out loud together as a family. One of the first times I ever noticed, anyway. And it was like almost surreal. I almost felt like I took an outside perspective, and I'm like, look at this happiness here.
Yeah.
And I just felt like a whole new,
Sweet.
I didn't do it on purpose. But really, it's moments like that I don't know, they're transformative. And I think just in that laughter, there was just that kind of a connection and family bond. There's some kind of consciousness that changes because you do go from like your own individual to like a family consciousness. And I know I've heard other people say that, you have identities that grow. And so like as a child, your identity is, just your family. And then when you go out of the home, your identity kind of like then spreads out into the social larger world. And then if you get a partner, you've got this identity that transforms in that way. And then if you have kids, you have this like parent identity, and it just, you're expanding your identity constantly with new dimensions, and parenthood is like that for sure.
Yeah.
For
it's
sure.
A big dimension.
It's a big dimension.
What do you think is necessary for a good future of fatherhood?
Yeah. Now we're getting into the good stuff. Well, I think fatherhood has changed quite a bit. And it's not as simple as it used to be, where the dad went out and worked and then came home and enforced the rules if it needed be, and then sat in his lazy boy, whatever it's called, drinking beer, watching sitcoms, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's not as simple. Men have not typically, society has not always expected them to handle those kinds of responsibilities. So I feel like there's a learning curve. I feel like I'm picking up a lot, and I see other dads that also do a great job, but there isn't like great examples, right? That you just fall into, just kind of follow the patterns. But I think that there's something really powerful that is changing in fatherhood. This is what I'm really excited about. This is probably one of my core drivers. And I think about it like in terms of like evolutionary psychology or biological psychology or whatever. I don't remember the name of the course. It was like some crazy course. But the point is, it was like this idea that women are mothers are connected to the baby physically, right? And so a male human can play the part of conception and then duck out, disappear, be gone. So a man doesn't have as much on the line, just from a human animal standpoint.
Okay.
He doesn't necessarily have to be as choosy per se. And we've seen that probably historically with men versus women. Women do have to be more choosy because not only would they be making a 9-month commitment to carry a child.
Closer to 10.
Okay. Then they're also more vulnerable in the sense that, I mean, your body's
vulnerable in so many ways.
And then after the birth, I mean, you're going to want, if you think back of like hunter-gatherer days, you're going to want some sort of protection or shelter and things that, like a woman wants to be choosy and wants to have a partner that's going to be there. Now, like on that idea, it makes me think that, mothers can raise children. There are single mothers that do a great job. Not to say it is not extremely difficult, and they're basically doing the impossible. But there's something that we know from studies and data is that when men are there and they are present, not just as the sperm donor, but as an active and engaged participant of the family, as a father, kids' outcomes are way better, for one. I'm sure wife's outcomes are way better. She's not dealing with quite as much stress and has a teammate. And I think that there has been a lot more emphasis on men showing up in ways where it hasn't been that in the past. And I'm hoping that it looks like this. So there's this guy that studied violence over human history, and violence has slowly decreased. So like the oldest skeletons we have of humans, most of their skulls were bashed in, right? So like caveman.
Violence.
Yeah, violence has slowly declined. I mean, you get ups and downs, obviously. And compassion and empathy has slowly inclined over humanity's long course, which is pretty cool.
We need more of that.
And I think that men showing up, not aggressive, not violent, like sometimes that's the role I think people have in their head, or, well, I'm a man, I'll be the strong, tough man, When they start showing up, empathetic, present, open, caring, safe, strong, that's the environment where the family really benefits and where kids can really thrive. And I hope and think that looks like where fatherhood is heading, is more towards that trajectory. And that's exciting. I think that's really good news for the world and the future and our own kids and generation. So those are my big thoughts on it.
Yay. Okay. Anything else on your mind? I have one last question.
It doesn't really fit in this conversation.
Okay. Later this week. Let me ask you, in closing, what are the traits or things you have seen or experiences you've had that you admire the fatherhood of some of other people in our circle?
So other fathers doing it right.
Yeah. Can you name some of the things, the traits?
Yeah. Okay, so some people have come to mind, and I've thought, like, hey, they're really showing up. This was kind of a unique situation. Not what I would consider ideal, but there's a couple that is separating. And they have apparently done a pretty good job of talking with their kiddo about it. Because the kid is like, hey, I get to have 2 houses now. And, like, they framed it so that there's not a big burden falling on the child.
To carry the
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Or feel responsible, which is what kids usually do.
Yeah, that
know?
is great.
Yeah. And I thought, like, in I went out um, for a beer with this person, and he was talking about um, the hardest thing about the separation is he won't be able to see his kid every single night. And a lot of dads are not there. And that's not dogging on dads. I think it's, people are just where they're at. But how beautiful that some dads are, right? Like, I think that is a very beneficial kind of quality.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then I think another friend that has inspired me is someone who has come through a lot of trauma, and some of the things that he experienced mental health wise were destabilizing for him personally, but also for the family. And even though he was down and out and having some pretty big challenges, he took his role as a father very seriously, even in the face of all of that. And he found ways to reach out to people when he was feeling like he wasn't sure how to hold it all together. He also found that certain medications did help stabilize him. Although nobody wants to be on a medication, but he took them like religiously, like, I'm going to make sure I stay as stable as I can for my family. I would love to not have to take these. But the point is, I know this helps me. And I think in some ways, it's easy for a man to be like, I don't need no damn medicine.
No, I hear what you're saying.
And for him to take a knee, so to speak, I think.
Ego knee?
Yeah, for real. And I think that's a big part of fatherhood is you cast your ego to the side and do what needs done.
Which almost feels counterintuitive to manhood.
Right, yeah.
So that's a whole other thing too.
Yeah. Yep. But I've just been impressed to see the people that, even in weakness and in things not going well, still sort of holding to the code of good dadhood. And there's more, but I think we'll have a special episode where we feature.
Just shout out all the dads we love.
Yeah, maybe interview them. That would actually be pretty great.
That would be really fun.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, happy Father's Day again. Happy Father's Day to anyone out there. May, fatherhood, maybe like redefine fatherhood and keep growing it in ways that give men the space to feel and experience life and not just be a cog in the machine of performance, and also create in that healthier families.
Yeah. One last thing, I'll say this.
Right, okay.
So I think probably back to biology, women are more naturally or traditionally experienced with community.
Yes.
So you think about the hunter-gatherer societies when men went out. Sometimes they'd go on hunting expeditions for weeks and come back with a moose or whatever. But the women were typically always in a state of community, and they understood the value of maintaining community stability and community reciprocity and all those sort of like things that go into having a healthy group of people living together or in close proximity. And so men kind of shifted out of that, and they went and killed, and like it's a totally different mindset to go out and hunt and kill and defend, like if it were a battle or a war of some kind, right? And then to come home and leave that out in the field, right? Yeah. I think for men, that's sort of the biological challenge that they're up against, because it's ingrained to be the one, not the community holder. So, but it's humanity has changed, right? Like just like the empathy going up, we know that the outcomes for any human is going to be cooperation is a way better outcome than competition. Yeah. Right? Diplomacy is a way better outcome than the battlefield. So anyway, I think it's a good thing for men to be going through this evolution.
And I would say, to cap that, you building out your community of male friends was a drastic improvement in our relationship, at least cool. On my end, because I think women have more naturally community and more places to put things. They have more
Sure.
more areas to fill their bucket or to hold their
Space,
stories
yeah.
and hold space, but men typically don't have that.
Right.
And so when we got to the place where it was safe enough, more and more for me to
Mhm.
hold that space, it started to feel like a lot because I felt like I was getting the whole fire hose and decimating that. Disseminating, thank you. Just decimating, like to blow something up.
I think so.
Disseminating that. Okay. Someone please teach me vocabulary. Disseminating that, I think, was a helpful thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. And one of the friends I referred to, we've had, I don't know, countless conversations about how do men have community, right? What does
Mhm.
community among men look like today? And I know there's like these weird revivals of like, come to the manhood camp. Alpha male. Yes, exactly. And I don't think there's anything wrong with like the athleticism of it or the strength building or the cooperation, but I mean some of those are just stupid, like a bunch of like chicken roosters trying to I don't know just
we do have roosters, so we can fairly say this that is how they
strutting. But I think that's ego again. And I think ego serves a purpose, and ego, you have to have an ego to live in the world because it's based on your needs. But I think one of the problems also that happens is ego norms get transferred from generation to generation when they're no longer relevant.
Okay, can you break that down for me like I'm a third grader?
I might need some.
Ego norms get passed down when they're no longer relevant.
Yeah, from generation to generation. So like Johnny treats his kids the way that Dad was treating him.
Sure.
But
unless he undoes that consciously.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's just normal to pass on those things.
Yeah.
I've heard this story like a bunch of times where the lady, this is not men, but it still tracks. So this woman was cutting the ends off of the ham and putting it in the oven. And then the husband's like, why are you doing that? She's like, oh, my mom always did it. And then she asked her mom, and her mom's like, well, grandma always did it. Yeah. And then they asked grandma, and grandma was like, because the oven was too small. I had to cut the ends off to get the ham to fit. So it's kind of like this idea.
You pass something down.
Yeah, because that's the way it was done. Yeah. And it works. That's sort of the fail point of conservatism is like, we keep doing it this way because this is the tradition or this is the way that it has served us. Well, and it does serve for a while, but eventually things need updated is all. Yeah. And I think generationally those things get passed on, but.
And you're saying about the ego, male ego specifically.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of this rise of, it's an extinction burst of old school manhood.
Yeah.
Where we're not going to be made into wimps, Is
an extinction burst, where like something's getting pushed to the edge and so they like magnify it to try to bring it back? Is that the concept?
Yes. Okay. Yep. But usually it's on its way out.
Okay.
So, and I think that's probably the case here.
So as we're talking about fatherhood, masculinity, all of that, specifically, I think what I hear you say is that, obviously I didn't hear it very well, the old ways get passed down until we start to buck up against them. Mm-hmm. And it seems like there's been quite a bit of bucking up against, could we just call it the toxic masculinity prototype? And so we're seeing it a lot right now. Like trying to get everybody back to fill the pews of the toxic masculinity church.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a great example. Yeah. So, but I feel like that's probably a pattern everywhere.
Sure. Yeah.
And human beings tend to do what was done that worked in the past, but everything changes. And so, and I don't know that you said people were bucking up against toxic masculinity. And I know that those conversations happened. More often I heard women saying that. Yeah. I think there's also just this natural part of like men saying, well, that just doesn't work here.
Yeah.
Right. And so, but then when everybody starts changing, the people that didn't think they had to change get nervous.
Yeah.
We gotta save the, anyway, those are just thoughts, I think, but.
Those are just thoughts, I think.
Yeah.
Thanks
to new
for
manhood.
Sharing. To new manhood, fatherhood. fatherhood that is involved and genuine and vulnerable and strong and brave and kind.
It's the
Obviously.
the opposites.
The poles,
Yeah.
the duality is
Yeah.
minimizing.
Yeah. You know, like a good book, and they're like, it's thrilling yet introspective. they always like do the opposites.
Yeah.
Or a good meal, like, oh, it's so salty, but yet has a countered with sweetness,
Yeah.
and it's got the heat, but then
Yeah.
And I think like countering those things, it's like strength tempered with kindness.
Yeah.
Right? Like strength is cool if you carry it.
If cool is kind.
If cool is kind. Yeah.
Thank you.